dice. You love them. It's your boy, back at it. Back at it with a video he should be scripting, but he's not. I'm not gonna do it. You can't make me. So I was gonna look up his name. I saw a video a couple months ago about a guy who recycled paper. Hang on. I can show you. Who took cardboard and paper and he blended them as like if you were to like recycle paper and make actual sheets. He would shred paper, he used rice paste, I use cornstarch. I need to experiment with rice paste. It just seems like a pain. But he would take kitty cat. But he would take paper, a binder, and water, and he'd put those three together, blend it up, and then he made these 3D printed molds. He used 3-part molds. I'll get into what I used, but they split apart. You put cardboard in here, and I should hopefully do close up so you can see what's happening. But you put cardboard in there, you put it together, and you squish it, and it makes really interesting cubes, and they're like really dense and pretty strong. I found some of them are weaker than others. It really does come down to how dense you make them. But this gets to what I was coming to. I took his model. This is his. I did add the wire and the wing nuts because I felt it more practical. So I added them. Fight me. But I figured if instead of having a 3-part and you used a 2-part, you could, in theory, make things other than cubes in simple shapes. And I guess I'm not quite disproving that. I do want to experiment with making figurines and stuff in the future. But, so my first idea was to make these little, my first proof of concept was to make these little beads. And these beads, I used a 2-part mold and a sleeve to shape them. And one's a simple sphere, the other one is a sphere with like a dent in it, think like the Death Star or some shit. So I made those, and when those worked great, I was like, cool. I'm gonna try making a dice set. And I was like, okay, a dice set, that's a cool idea. Recyclable, compostable dice, 100% recycled dice, that's a cool idea. That's interesting. New hobby. So I immediately got started making molds for these dice. And I initially tried using that 2 mold idea I had for the beads, and there were a couple problems with it, which I guess I'll go over. Is this? Yeah. Okay. So my first attempt was to have just a die, cut it in half, and split it into a mold. and put it into a mold. So each one of these has half a die in it. You'd put paper in it, you'd squish it together, and it would hold. And that's a solid idea in concept, but in practice, with how deep I had to make the numbers, I guess I didn't have to. Well, yes, I did have to, but that doesn't come into play yet. We'll get to that in like a week or something. But I made the numbers deep, so when the mold dried, two things would happen. One, there's no way for me to open the mold without splitting the die in half. So I have, and I'll show you the results at the end. But so the die got split in half, and actually in this type of mold that I made, to get the die out of the mold, I had to essentially entirely destroy the die. So that was a failure. So I figured, well, I can't do it if the die's laying flat and I cut it in half. That doesn't work. What if I put the die on a diagonal, so it's standing on one of its corners, and then we cut that in half, and put a mold in there. And so this came with its own problems, trials and tribulations. And we'll see when we get a close-up, because I made two of these molds, and I'm not going to tell you. You guys are smart, so I'm sure you can figure out the difference between the two and why one would never work over the other, or why one is just wrong as opposed to the other, which also doesn't work. This one also I can't open the mold without splitting the die in half. However, this one did make progress, because even though the dice were split in half, I could get those halves out relatively undamaged, and they would have a good, it would look like a die. It would look like half a die. And I could glue those two halves. I could glue those two halves together, but I think I didn't do that because it felt like it would defeat the purpose of making a 100% recycled die if I just put Elmer's glue in there, which, as far as I'm aware, isn't compostable or recyclable. So that brings me, so I've shown you three failed dice so far, and this is where the versions get kind of complicated, because I have it basically chopped down to 5 molds, 4 failures, 1 that works, but I have some problems with which I'll go over. So we're getting up to the 4th one, which had a bunch of difficulties. Since I had problems getting the die out of the mold unharmed, I figured, what if parts of the mold come out with the die? I can make little tiles for each of the faces of the die that can slide freely in and out of the mold. And so that is what I tried to do. And so I got these little tiles. They each have a number. I think they're about 1/4 inch thick, give or take, not counting the numbers. Maybe closer to, 1/4 inch, maybe a little bit more, but they're about 1/4 inch thick, and they would go into this housing unit. I made the tolerances too tight, so this barely opens. I can barely get the lid off, and the tiles get stuck in it. So I got one tile in there, couldn't get it out, and essentially had to scrap it. I didn't even get to test this one. But I still felt the theory was solid. So what I did is I made another housing unit. I believe the housing units are actually the same. I don't know for sure if I did make changes. Oh, I made a few changes to the lid, but they're minimal. Aside from the lid changes, the housing is the same. But I loosened the tolerances, so now the tiles can slide in and out. And these tiles were the main issue throughout this project. Or not throughout this mold. I went through, I think, three or four generations of tiles before I got ones that worked, because I wanted the tolerances to be tight enough that the die would remain a cube, which is important because I want this to be a good functional die, while also being loose enough that the tiles can freely slide in and out of the mold, which was a fine line to walk, but I eventually got it to work. And I mean, I'll show it to you in the close-up, which I keep talking about, and I'm dreading filming because I don't want to do it, but I got a D6 that works and looks decent. I've made, I think, 2 of them, 2.5, depending how you count it, and one of them has been a success. I have a theory about why the other one failed, and the half one that I said, because I did 2.5, is just I had some extra paper from working on some other stuff, so I just kind of threw it in there, and it wasn't meant to turn into a die. It was just I had some excess stuff that I needed to use. But I guess I'll talk about what I want to change about the current molds and what I will, because this isn't going to be the final one probably. So things I need to change is I just need to make everything thicker, because I use a vise to compress these, and the lid is already showing denting and wear from it, while the bottom, which I guess is thicker, I wouldn't have guessed that, isn't showing that. I need to make, I don't need to, but the walls are very thin and I want to make those thicker. They bend just by squeezing them, and I just don't like that. It's not, I can probably get away with keeping them how they are, but I don't want to. I also need, on all the other models before this, I had sleeves. On all the models before this, they had sleeves that would go around them, so once you compress them, I'd put them in the sleeve, and the sleeve would keep them compressed. I guess I just got the dimensions wrong for these ones, so the sleeve I made for them just doesn't fit, which is, I mean, obviously my fault, and I've just been too lazy to fix that. But talking about the sleeve while I'm here, is the one I made for it is even, I guess I'm glad it doesn't fit, because it's way too thin and is way too malleable, and I fear it wouldn't be able to keep the die compressed without breaking. I haven't had any sleeves fail thus far, but I think it's a reasonable fear. And I don't know, I think that's about it. I'll just show you guys the failures and the success now. And I mean, I guess just fucking editing me will take it away. Oh, I'm working on a D4 now because I want to make the entire dice set. So I'm working on the D4 right now, which is harder than you'd think, I guess. I thought it'd be easy, but I knew it would pose some difficulties. I'm not looking forward to... I mean, actually, I'm kind of looking forward to the D8 and D10, because I don't think those will be too bad. But I guess D10, D100, those I don't think will be too bad. But the D12 and D20 worry me. Those will be interesting. But the D4 is in the works now. I kind of have one that's already succeeded, kind of. So, next week or something, I don't know. Not next week, sorry. Sometime in the future, D4. And way in the future, other ones. Any suggestions are welcome. Especially, because I imagine when I get to the harder die, I'll post more often because I'll have a lot more failures. So any suggestions on how to make those, how to improve my current ones, anything like that, leave them below. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, like, subscribe. I still can't remember his name. I didn't look it up. The guy who originally gave me this inspiration, I'll link his channel below, and the video I'm referencing, I'll link that below too, because our methods are basically identical. There's some differences, but barely. So if you want to know my method, just watch his video. If for whatever reason this gains traction and you want to see my method, I can show it off, but it's really nothing special. It's just his, but a little more janky. So have a good one. Remember, eat the money, burn the rich. See you around.